tell the people back home what exactly is EOS?
EOS is a software that introduces a blockchain architecture that's designed to enable vertical and horizontal scaling of decentralized applications. This is achieved through an operating system-like construct upon which applications can be built upon. And the software provides accounts, authentication, databases, and asynchronous communication, and the sharing of applications across multiple CPU cores and clusters. The resulting technology is a blockchain architecture that has the potential to scale to millions of transactions per second and eliminates user fees and allows for quick and easy deployment of decentralized applications.
Great, great. So EOS, right? EOS is kind of like a competitor to Ethereum, right? So yeah, right. Ethereum is currently what, second in coin market cap with market value, and well, it's by Vitalik Buterin, and I think we've all seen the news lately about how Vitalik Buterin is talking about EOS, sometimes not in such good light. And EOS itself, they're gonna have a mainnet launch tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow on the 1st of June, about 23:59 or 23 o'clock, they will be having the mainnet launch. We don't really know how long it's gonna take, right? Yeah. We do know, however, that they intend to have the mainnet launch by June 2nd. Question from Amelia: why is EOS moving to mainnet? I think this is a simple one. I hope you can answer it.
Pardon me, sorry.
Why is EOS moving to mainnet?
Why? Because the US for US we hold now is just a ERC token. It's just, you know, it's cool. Yeah, you have to translate from the cool to the real money, to real tickets you get.
For EOS, we've got 21 block producers, am I right? And
yeah, 21, yeah, top.
And 21 block producers. And how do we change the constitution of the EOS?
Yeah, so I think that you know, I can't specifically comment how the constitution gets changed on a day-by-day basis, but yes, presumably block producers will implement something in how they're running the node that has perhaps an update to the constitution, and you would require at least 2/3 consensus amongst the block producers running their nodes over a period of time in order for that constitution to be adopted. Mm-hmm. It's never like, okay, one day I'll wake up and decide to change something. If I change something, I'll need, you know, 14 other block producers to agree with me.
Well, if you wake up one day and you decide to just change everything, then there's no consensus, right? You're just dictatorship.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing about delegated proof of stake, right? Is you need that 2/3 majority of the block producers to agree on which way the code or changes happen.
Hello everyone, I'm Denny again, from Huobi Pool, senior manager for operation overseas business, just a co-host for the Huobi Talk. So see you tomorrow.
Hello, my name is Luke Stokes. I'm with EOS DAC. I'm part of the launch team there, and I'm really excited to talk with you and your community. I'm looking forward to your questions tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Ross Dold from EOSphere here in Australia, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on all my fellow block producer candidates on Huobi Talk live tomorrow at 12 o'clock GMT +8.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Rose. I'm head of community at EOS New York. I'm very excited to answer some questions and get into a heated debate with these guys right here and some others who aren't here, and I can't wait to get a haircut before our whole show.
Yeah, thanks so much. We hope to see you tomorrow at 12 p.m. Singapore time. Remember to subscribe to Huobi Pro on YouTube for more of such interesting talks with EOS block producers.
Who is the ECAF, how we nominate the arbitrator, and how we approve the nominator and the ECAF. And can also have a theory that maybe we need more ECAF to compete. Oh, sorry, maybe another some arbitrator in a different form to competing with the ECAF is totally market price for all the arbitrator things.
To that, another interesting aspect is the new constitution proposed by Block.one doesn't mention ECAF, and their proposal move all of that to the application layer, so that if there's conflicts, it's within a specific application, and that application has to determine who their arbitration preference is with their own users. I like the idea of turning everything into a contract, something that voluntarily is agreed to by different independent parties, not just, you're using it, so therefore you agreed. A little bit less obvious.
In the world of blockchain, all things should be ruined by the smart contract.
Well, until the smart contract's broken, then we probably need some
Oops.
You're supposed to list your arbitrator in every transaction, essentially, as far as my understanding of the system. That's part of how it's supposed to work, but it's not currently set up that way.
And you don't have to list the exact arbitrator, but you do have to list the forum. The reason why ECAF doesn't actually have any power, except they maintain a set of rules for dispute resolution.
Hello everyone, I'm Denny again, from Huobi Pool, senior manager for operation overseas business, just co-host for the Huobi Talk. So see you tomorrow.
Hello, my name is Luke Stokes. I'm with EOS DAC. I'm part of the launch team there, and I'm really excited to talk with you and your community. I'm looking forward to your questions tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Ross Dold from EOS here in Australia, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on all my fellow block producer candidates on Huobi Talk live tomorrow, 12 o'clock GMT +8.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Rose. I'm head of community at EOS New York. I'm very excited to answer some questions and get into a heated debate with these guys right here and some others who aren't here, and I can't wait to get a haircut before our whole show.
Thanks so much. We hope to see you tomorrow at 12 p.m. Singapore time. Remember to subscribe to Huobi Pro on YouTube for more of such interesting talks with EOS Block Producers.
Who is the ECAF, how we nominate the arbitrator, and how we approve the nominator and the ECAF. And can also have a theory that maybe we need more ECAF to compete. Oh, sorry, maybe another some arbitrator in a different form to competing with the ECAF is totally market price for all the arbitrator things.
To that, another interesting aspect is the new constitution proposed by Block.one doesn't mention ECAF, and their proposal move all of that to the application layer, so that if there's conflicts, it's within a specific application, and that application has to determine who their arbitration preference is with their own users. I like the idea of turning everything into a contract, something that voluntarily is agreed to by different independent parties, not just, you're using it, so therefore you agreed. A little bit less obvious.
In the world of blockchain, all things should be ruined by the smart contract.
Well, until the smart contract's broken, then we probably need some
Oops.
You're supposed to list your arbitrator in every transaction, essentially, as far as my understanding of the system. That's part of how it's supposed to work, but it's not currently set up that way.
And you don't have to list the exact arbitrator, but you do have to list the forum. The reason why ECAF doesn't actually have any power, except they maintain a set of rules for dispute resolution.
Hello everyone, I'm Denny again, from Huobi Pool, senior manager for operation overseas business, just co-host for the Huobi Talk. So see you tomorrow.
Hello, my name is Luke Stokes. I'm with EOS DAC. I'm part of the launch team there, and I'm really excited to talk with you and your community. I'm looking forward to your questions tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Ross Dold from EOS here in Australia, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on all my fellow block producer candidates on Huobi Talk live tomorrow, 12 o'clock GMT +8.
Hey everyone, my name is Kevin Rose. I'm head of community at EOS New York. I'm very excited to answer some questions and get into a heated debate with these guys right here and some others who aren't here. And I can't wait to get a haircut before our whole show.
Yeah, thanks so much. We hope to see you tomorrow at 12 p.m. Singapore time. Remember to subscribe to Huobi Pro on YouTube for more of such interesting talks with EOS Block Producers.
With ECAF, how we nominate the arbitrator, and how we approve the nominator and the ECAF, and Kevin also have a theory that maybe we need more ECAF to compete. Oh, sorry, maybe another some arbitrator in a different form to competing with the ECAF is totally market price for all the arbitrator things.
To that, another interesting aspect is the new constitution proposed by Block.one doesn't mention ECAF, and their proposal move all of that to the application layer, so that if there's conflicts, it's within a specific application, and that application has to determine who their arbitration preference is with their own users. I like the idea of turning everything into a contract, something that voluntarily is agreed to by different independent parties, not just you're using it, so therefore you agreed. A little bit less obvious.
In the world of blockchain, all things should be ruined by the smart contract.
Well, until the smart contract's broken, then we probably need some
Oops.
You're supposed to list your arbitrator in every transaction, essentially, as far as my understanding of the system. That's part of how it's supposed to work, but it's not currently set up that way.
You don't have to list the exact arbitrator, but you do have to list the forum. The reason why ECAF doesn't actually have any power, except they maintain a set of rules for dispute resolution.
Bitcoin opens up the imagination and possibilities of a global digital currency. The blockchain technology that comes with Bitcoin has put our society in an incredible time. Huobi is actively involved in this wave of rising digital assets in 2013, helping to enlighten Chinese people in digital currency investment. Huobi has made a brilliant achievement in taking the highest market share and received the highest trading volume in China. At present, Huobi Group is opening a global integrated digital asset transaction services with a strong focus on customer service. Huobi Group has set up operations and service centers in Singapore, Hong Kong, Seoul, Tokyo, Beijing, and Shenzhen. With our new base in the beautiful Singapore, Huobi Group will bring quality educational and service experiences to millions of users of digital assets in 130 countries and regions.
Corey.
I'm Simeon.
And we are from
Huobi! Huobi! Huobi!
So thanks for joining us for Huobi Talk, episode 36. And today we are very lucky to have 7 block producers with us who will be on the line with us very shortly. And we have Denny Wu from Huobi Mining Pool. He will be also joining us as the co-host for today's discussion.
So for the first part of the live streaming, we'll be touching on governance, given the recent disputes regarding ECAF, as well as Block.one's push to overhaul the entire EOS constitution. Now, joining this discussion will be David from EOS 42, Kevin from EOS New York, and Elliot from EOS Seoul. Now, for the second part of the live streaming, we will be having a discussion on technical updates and highlights following the mainnet launch, such as RAM issues.
But before we go into actual discussion, we want to share a little contest for you guys. It's an airdrop for all our viewers. So until the 9th of July, you can share your insights, summarize and review this episode, and we will give you an airdrop. We will be picking 5 winners with the highest number of likes from Medium and Steemit. Each winner will walk away with 100 USDT equivalent of airdrop tokens. Check out the description below for more info.
So for the uninitiated or newbies, EOS is actually stands for the Enterprise Operation System. Now it aims to become a decentralized operating system which can support industrial scale decentralized applications or dApps. Now think of it as Windows OS in the PC world.
So some of the latest EOS news is that there's been an arbitrator controversy. There's been this issue about ECAF, which stands for EOS Core Arbitration Forum, which recently ordered a freeze of 27 accounts that had been compromised by hackers or scammers. Secondly, the action attracted significant criticism. On one hand, observers felt the order violated the principles of cryptocurrency payments, that they should not be subjected to censorship. And another issue is that the EOS network participants felt that the ECAF processes were haphazard and unprofessional. Thirdly, Block.one proposed an EOS constitutional overhaul. And lastly, there's been an issue with the RAM. RAM prices exploded amid the EOS network speculation, seeing over 14,000% gain.
So actually, Corey, last night the RAM prices actually sort of fell back down
really?
slightly, but it's still a substantial gain from when it first started trading.
Yes, I heard someone on like 8 times by just buying it.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot of gains. Now, so just a reminder on the interactive format we have here right today. We want to keep things very interactive, so meaning that if you have any questions or comments, feel free to write on the live chat box on YouTube. We will select some interesting questions that will be selected on the spot to be featured with our block producers to answer during the session. So without further ado,
we like to invite our block producers from Huobi Mining Pool, EOS 42, EOS New York, and EOS Seoul, who will be joining us in this discussion on the EOS current state of governance.
So let's take a look at who is joining us today. So from EOS 42, we have David Packham. He's the head of strategy and community. From EOS New York, we have Kevin Rose, co-founder and head of community, and EOS Seoul, Elliot Shin, the CEO of EOS China.
And not to mention our co-host, Denny, who is also the operations manager at Huobi Mining Pool. He'll be joining us to help moderate the entire session.
Looks like we have someone joining us.
Yeah.
Hello, who is on the line?
So we have Kevin Rose, who actually joined us last night for the rehearsal. He has many opinions, particularly about ECAF. I think one of the main takeaways that I had with Kevin last night was that there's this overall consensus or opinion that ECAF by itself, as a principle, is still a work in progress, very much work in progress.
Oh, okay.
So the things that they are doing right now, it doesn't seem like, like you mentioned just now, there's some comments from one end of the spectrum, which is opinions given by ECAF are relatively haphazard, so they're not very professional. Yeah, so that is one part of what Kevin was trying to mention last evening. So I think...
Do we have anyone on the line right now?
Oh, hi Kevin.
Hi, hello.
Yeah, how are you doing? What time is it right now in New York?
Midnight.
Wow.
So I'm wide awake. I'm ready to go.
Hey, thanks.
You're pinging to go, and good morning from London here as well. It's just hit 5 a.m. here.
Hi David. Hi David.
Hello there. Hi.
And we have Elliot.
Elliot from EOS Seoul. Hi, Elliot. Can you hear us? Elliot. Hi, Elliot. Can you? No, I don't think he can hear us.
Okay.
Well, while you've got some technical difficulties, I'll just say that we had an EOS London meetup last night, and we had Moti Tabulo, the head of ECAF, giving a speech there. And it was certainly interesting, I think, more than so much the content of the speech, which was really outlining the purpose of ECAF. And I think that's reasonably well understood now within the community. What was more interesting, I think, were the sorts of questions that were then put to Moti over the next 20 minutes. Some quite challenging ones around whether it had legitimacy, did it have any purpose in the proposed second constitution, and so on. So I think it's good to see the community so engaged and already asking some of these questions.
Yeah. Yeah, so from the discussion we had last evening with Kevin, I think it's very much this entire engagement of the EOS community to give their feedback about current processes and basically to better the constitution, not only the constitution, but the mechanisms for arbitration as well. Sorry, so it seems we have a little bit of technical difficulties. Do we have Elliot? Elliot, are you there? Elliot, can you hear me?
Are you not hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, okay, I can hear you. And I think we just welcomed Denny on as well. Hey, Denny.
Hey, Denny. Denny, can you hear us? No.
Okay, we'll come back to Denny.
Yes.
Hello, I'm here.
Hey, Denny. Elliot, can you hear us? Elliot?
Yeah, of course. Finally, I'm here.
I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, so maybe before we kick off the discussion, maybe we can just go round the table and introduce yourself. So we start with Kevin, EOS New York.
Hey everybody, my name is Kevin Rose. I'm co-founder and head of community for EOS New York. Happy to be here.
Then we move on to
David. How about you?
Sure. Hi there, I'm David Packham. I'm the co-founder of EOS 42 and head of strategy and community.
And Elliot? Elliot, how about you?
Elliot, a brief introduction.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Elliot from EOS Seoul. Okay, can you hear?
Yes, yes. Denny.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Denny, finally yourself.
Hi, my name is Denny, the senior manager from Huobi Pool. Nice to meet you guys again. Thank you, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, hey. So let's kick off this discussion with a question directly to David, EOS 42. Now, maybe you could give us a rough overview of the issues related to EOS governance at this moment. There has been a lot of emphasis being placed on the ECAF process. Maybe you could shed some light.
Yeah, I think the biggest single challenge that we currently face relating to governance is the fact that we are in this interim state without a ratified, either a ratified constitution or as a consequence, a ratified arbitration service. So where we are right now, for example, is that you look at ECAF and what it is. It's able to pass advice. It's not able to pass official orders that in any capacity. And because the Constitution itself has not been ratified underlying that, we are left in a situation where if they pass advisory orders, block producers are being left to pass and make decisions between themselves as the only real elected representatives on this network so far to actually enact them or not. And that is what's caused so much of the early controversy between those decisions to freeze accounts. So to my mind, the single biggest challenge for the community as a whole, all of us, is that we need to actually vote on a referendum and actually pass a constitution, whatever it may be, because that will add a lot more clarity around the boundaries of responsibilities for both block producers and the likes of ECAF in terms of where it fits in.
Great, thanks, David.
Okay, so Kevin, so can you share with us, since David shared that you guys decided to go ahead without consulting ECAF, so can you share about what's your opinion on that?
Are you talking about when the unanimous decision was made to blacklist a number of accounts?
Yes.
Okay. First, we absolutely did consult ECAF. So a few days prior to that happening, we were all of the elected block producers were on a call with Moti, the head of ECAF, where we described to him the situation where accounts were in danger of imminent theft. Tokens were going to be stolen. And what we were asking him specifically, and it was me, I actually made this request, and I was very careful with my words. I didn't want to say, we need you to issue an order that asks us to freeze these accounts. What we said on the call was, we are going to submit a claim to you that has to do, we're not even going to discuss the content of, but we would like that you expedite the review of this claim. That is all we asked on the call. And days went by. In the claim that we sent, days went by where we didn't receive a response. And then finally the day came where these tokens were going to be unstaked and they were going to be stolen. Their response was, I'm sorry, we do not believe that we possess the authority to provide you an opinion. And so we were left with the choice of allowing property to be stolen or following the process to the letter. And the difficult thing was the process to the letter, so to speak, it was sort of non-existent to begin with. We didn't really have a process in place. So this whole time, we're all trying to follow the spirit of this governance system that we had been working on for so many months. But just to go back to your original question, we absolutely did consult ECAF prior to making this decision. And I mean, consulting is a weak word to describe it. We pleaded with them to provide a ruling. And actually, I want to ask David a question. So I'm very excited to hear more about Moti and what he presented tonight. But that when you said that the arbitration opinions or advice, is that only describing their rulings, opinions, whatever, in the context of the constitutional gray period we are in, or given proper constitutional authority and process and setup, do they still consider themselves only providing an optional opinion to follow?
Yeah, they didn't actually clarify that question when it was put to them. Not sufficiently, to my view, whether or not this is just for this interim grey period, or whether we should always, as block producers, have an opinion on this. What I'm taking away so far, and seems to be the emerging consensus on that, however, is that we always, as block producers, should form our own opinion and, in theory, veto a decision rather than necessarily being a jury within this and making other decisions. But if there is something fundamental that ECAF were to pass as advice stroke an order, and we did not agree with it, we are entitled within our power to actually veto a particular decision. And obviously it would pass in theory on a 15+1 majority.
So that's what Moti said?
No, but this is what he sort of hinted at in his reply. It was quite a grey response to a grey question in that sense. Still, to me, though, the uncertainty around this is it puts block producers in a very challenging position, because we don't really yet have full clarity on answers to a question like that. And to my mind, we really should be given as much guidance as possible, because what we have, for example, in our own code of conduct, EOS 42, and this was circulated as part of the community, most of the block producers I'm aware of published out a code of conduct, circulated it to the community, it was debated, and then it was implemented as part of their whole election pledge. And ours is that we would execute all arbitration orders, and that it was not for us necessarily to question them. And at the time, that seemed to be the consensus amongst the community. And since then, it's become more of a challenge from the likes of Daniel Larimer and others, that actually block producers should not be blind robots that implement, but we should also have that power of veto and exercise it where they feel is applicable.
So, David, we took your. It was great when you issued that code of conduct, and we followed by issuing our own as well. I think it actually, to hear that, or to hear that he hinted at that, it makes me very disappointed, because we what we need to do as a community, and this is not up to the block producers, this is up to you, the token holders, and to everybody out there. We need to decide if we would like binding dispute resolution in EOS, because if you have a deciding body issue an opinion or ruling or order or whatever you want to call it, and the group that is responsible for executing that order, if they have the ability to evaluate it, to decide whether or not they want to do it, we don't have binding dispute resolution. And I'm not advocating one way or the other, but we just need to make a choice, because it's not this gray thing. Either arbitration is binding or it isn't. That's it. So we can make that choice when we have the ability to vote on referendum.
So maybe we cross over to Elliot. Elliot, what do you think about the current debacle? It seems to me that it's very much...
actually, yeah, from my... frankly speaking, we are... this is just an objective idea, and we just respect each BP's and ECAF's action. First of all, the stolen token or any unfair transaction should be freezed. That is very necessary, we think, to protect the personal the asset. That is definitely necessary. The second one is between the ECAF and each BP, we need more very smooth communication. This time, this was the first case. That's why we had some difficulty or the different opinion. It was not easy. This case, we can have a very smooth communication method or tool. This case, it will be a good lesson for all of our players, I think.
How about Denny?
I think, there's two alternatives today. The first one is ECAF just issue the opinion and let the community choose for it or not. That's good, because ECAF don't need any power source or to just can leave opinion, just like what a consult firm do in K Street in Washington, and they tell the Congress you might want to do that, and the Congress do it as well. That's great. And at SPP, we are just congressmen. And in other words, they say, hey, the ECAF is Supreme Court, so we must put every arbitrator to pass the referendum. The power comes from the token holders. So we have two solutions for the governance things. That means we have two ways to follow. That's what I think.
I disagree that the power comes from the token holders. It does ultimately, but the power comes from the Constitution, and the Constitution is voted on by the token holders. And I think that we're trying to take these ideas of a Supreme Court or consultants. The arbitration is a real thing. It actually exists. It's out there. It's working in dozens and dozens of countries. I feel like we're not looking out to them to understand how it already works in the real world. And in the places where it works, it's not an opinion. And again, I'm not advocating that we have arbitration or how we have it, but what I'm trying to convey is that it is binding if we are going to have it. If it's not going to be binding, it's literally worthless. No one needs to listen to opinions. We have more to do. And also the difference between them being like a consultant or, they're resolving a dispute by two consenting parties, or at least one consenting party in the case of a frozen account. But we just got to start to work through arbitration as a concept. Forget ECAF for a little bit. Just what is arbitration? Do we want binding dispute resolution on chain?
David, do you agree with what Kevin has said?
Yeah, I think fundamentally Kevin's completely right. It is about us actually making now some underlying fundamental decisions as a community about how we want the role of arbitration to fit. And this actually also comes down to the differing views of either the interim constitution, where you have arbitration at this base level, or whether or not you apply it at a DAT level on this secondary layer above, and where you could have multiple competing and differing types of arbitration and governance systems within each individual application. We need to make some of these fundamental decisions before we're really able to answer and have a lot more clarity in terms of how we want block producers to behave within this. I think if you look at it in the real world, arbitration is not an optional thing that people implement. They are binding decisions, and that is the whole purpose of them. That provides the clarity by which you get independent decision-making for dispute resolution. And where we have a situation right now where we're being told that, in theory, that is not the case, it is a challenge, I think, therefore, for block producers to be absolutely sure, therefore, on what their conduct should be in these scenarios right now. It also, I had a discussion last night with some people at the event, and I did make the point that where you have block producers, in theory, also looking at difficult decisions. Sometimes decisions are not always popular, but they can be the right decision for the community long term. You could end up whereby block producers being so accountable to token holders on an ongoing basis may opt to veto a decision rather than approve it, simply because it's a very unpopular one, even though it's the right decision. And there you have an immediate, to me, evidence of a potential conflict of interest there as to being whether or not they are the impartial and right ones to be making a judgment call like that. These are the sorts of challenges that we need to work through as a community and make a decision about.
So maybe just to provide some context to our viewers, now in Singapore, the arbitration process is such that two parties head to a tribunal whereby they discuss a third-party tribunal whereby they iron out the situation, talk about the contract and then decide. And the arbitrator ultimately issues a ruling, which the winning party can then bring the ruling to a court to enforce it. So it seems that we want to, EOS ecosystem wants to do something like this, but at the same time, it's in between the such protocols.
Well, there are a couple things. There are a couple things that happen before that too. It's not only for something to be arbitrated.
Yes.
You must first agree to arbitration prior to your agreement. You need to say, if things don't go well, we're going to arbitrate. We're not going to go to the courts. Okay, that's the first thing. And the second thing is, under what rules are you going to arbitrate? So in the example that you gave, it's in Singapore, but that's why it's mentioned in the Constitution. Is that because you need those two things, and that's why ECAF is mentioned in the Constitution, because you need to decide under what rules you're going to arbitrate, and they provide those rules.
Okay, so you mentioned something about Constitution. We're gonna put it at the side for a while first, because we have a question from Luke Stokes. Now, for arbitrage ruling to be binding and on-chain, does it have to be limited to things which can be proved with data on-chain? Maybe we can go to Kevin. Kevin, could you give an opinion on that question?
So the reason why would we want to have dispute resolution on-chain? You and I could be doing business. David, you and I could be doing business. And part of that business could be conducted on EOS. Part of it could be off. And you and I could agree to arbitration prior, and we could have a dispute, and we could use, I'm just going to use the International Center for Dispute Resolution for where we arbitrate. Now, if they were to arbitrate a ruling in your favor or mine, which involved things on chain, it would be worthless, because there's no court that they can go to. There's no state that can enforce any block producer to do anything. So the reason why we have dispute resolution on chain is because there's literally nothing else out there that can force EOS to do anything. And we need to have block producers feel comfortable recognizing a certain authority that flows from the Constitution. So that's one thing. To answer Luke's question, I guess it would depend, like in the example that I gave, what the agreement is between parties. And it's, if you're talking about Dan Larimer's proposed constitution, it may have to do with like the intent of code. But I think that it could involve things off-chain is the answer to the question. But it's a difficult question to answer, because you're asking, okay, well, please generalize every case that you'd ever have to arbitrate. You know, so it's not an easy answer, but okay. Maybe.
Okay, maybe we have another question for Elliot.
Okay.
So do you believe in Dan Larimer's call for a new constitution?
Okay, so I just briefly read it. It was not too long, not much in detail. But on the whole, agree with the one point that it want to try to minimize arbitrary interpretation, because it can be some subjective. Yeah. But the other side, my concern is, in case any bugs or extraordinary things happen, like this case, a stolen token, something like that. In this case, who can solve this problem, right? That is our assignment. In this case, and then there is no perfect code and should be fixed by arbitrary efforts, right? And then right now, who can do the arbitrary role is definitely one party is ECAF, or the other party can be our representative BPs. But still, we don't have the exact process or clear resolution tool or organization. Even ECAF is not elected by voting, right? For the more transparent organization, I think ECAF can be selected among via the voting process also, like BP. And then we can set up we can do some consensus on how to set up their arbitrary things. Should be minimized. That is our opinion also, yeah.
So Denny, just now Kevin mentioned something about the intent of code is law. Maybe you could share some insights from yourself.
From that, I think, the new constitution doesn't mention any ECAF things, proposed by Dan. I think, for now, we must agree this is a governance in the U.S. system, and we need to figure it out. But the too many block producers, just like the gentleman here, just proposed too many ways. So we need to find a way to make the countries to make sure we have the governance. I think everybody here already talked a lot. I just make some comments here.
So, okay, cool. So, David, this question about the Ricardian contract, do you think it's a good or bad idea?
I think Ricardian contracts are an absolute essential for the enabling of complete clarity to interpret the underlying code of smart contracts and the entire constitution. They provide that clarity to ensure that there's complete understanding in theory by all sides of the exact underlying meaning and intent. So to my mind, they were one of the best single things that have been implemented. However, what I've also seen, for example, is that the way they've been written for certain aspects, for example, of the interim constitution, there's disagreement on whether or not they're completely correct at present. So that, again, it probably presents another underlying perspective relating to all of this, which is that what we're actually seeing is some fundamental disagreements between some of the best and brightest minds across the community relating to certain aspects of governance right now. I saw somebody on the channel posting, you've got millions of dollars, spent 6 months on this. How is it you guys haven't got a plan, or at least a semi-plan? Well, the answer to that is that we do have that semi-plan, if you like, and that is the interim constitution, which was defined out and has then been circulated as widely as possible, worked through on various forums. We reached a community consensus such as we could at this interim point in time, and that's what we've launched with. But now what we're seeing are alternative proposals in terms of how all of this could work. I will say that one thing about the version 2 constitution that's been proposed, and this is a challenge for the community, is it provides absolute clarity at the base layer relating to there being no grey areas, I think, regarding arbitration, by saying that it will exist at this higher level. I think the challenge for the community to understand is if we were to implement that, all of the sorts of arbitration controls we currently will have with the interim constitution right now, if that were ratified, will no longer really be in place in a practical sense, I don't think. From what I can see so far, it will require some substantial time and investment to build out the infrastructure required to actually implement much of the arbitration functionality into the app layer. So we will probably end up, I think, with a period where we won't have any meaningful arbitration at all, or the associated protections or dispute resolution on EOS if we go for the version 2 of the Constitution, simply because it will take time and therefore there will be no controls in place. Now, I think the reason that they're doing that, though, is that they see some fundamental risks with what we're doing right now relating to this ending up becoming almost a Pandora's box that you open with much of this, almost the controls and powers of ECAF in its current form becoming almost too great. And that is the concern that seems to have been the primary driver behind version 2, along with the view that you should keep the base protocol layer much cleaner like this, so that it's something that absolutely everybody can agree on. And we don't right now have agreement on this. So these are all sorts of the sorts of challenges we have ahead. And that the best part about this is that when we get to this point of a referendum, which is really not far away now, we will be able to vote on multiple different versions of the Constitution, and everybody will therefore be able to have their say on this.
Okay, David. So you just mentioned that everyone has a say. So despite recent issues with the Constitution and maybe some disagreements, do you think EOS is more decentralized than Ethereum, and why you think it's better despite all these issues?
Well, the very fact that we're able to sit here in a fairly civilized way and have debates as a global community and then just talk about making wholesale changes to our constitution and the way that the ecosystem is structured should really be a lesson to the world that you can actually debate and make changes like this within a blockchain ecosystem. I mean, if you look at it, the way that it currently works within Ethereum is that they are trying to retrospectively add in those sorts of changes, but they don't have the voting mechanism for referendums in the same way that we do. So how do you actually push through a change like, for example, being able to update a code base and make contract changes? That ends up going into an amendment in Ethereum. It gets lengthily debated, and you have certain purists on one side who absolutely are against it, and you have others on another side who are for it, and it's very, very difficult for them to actually reach a consensus. In fact, the way they typically, most blockchains prior to this reach consensus is through a fork. So that is the challenge that they always have there inherently, whereas really we have the capacity with voting to actually reach consensus. It may not always be the view that you yourself might individually approve of, but you cannot deny that the majority will be the view that's followed. And that, I think, is probably the greatest strength that we have here. We have this ability to debate, as we're doing now, talk through issues, and gradually educate one another to a point where we can all agree. And there must be numerous occasions, I'm sure, Kevin and Elliot too, where you started with one view in this whole process, and then ended up coming out with a more informed view over time, where you perhaps changed your mind and gone complete 180 to another view. And I certainly have too. And I think the reason is that we're all learning in this space. It's very challenging for all of us to be able to come into such a series of complex debates and issues and necessarily have a single view that could not be viewed in multiple ways. So overall, that for me is the single biggest thing. Otherwise, we could always just go to simple ones like transactions per second, where it's pretty obvious why EOS is better.
So, David, you mentioned something about the voting system. Maybe I want to throw this question to Kevin. Now, what do you think of Block.one actually taking over the block producer voting using their 10% stack? Do you think it's a subversion?
Oh, okay. Well, the token holders are those who have the voice, and Block.one is a very large token holder. I couldn't tell you exactly why Block.one and/or Dan has decided to announce that, but if you want to talk about the centralization of EOS and how it's just a falsehood, the relatively chaotic or tumultuous events that have occurred rapidly since launch or leading up to launch is pretty good evidence that it was not a centralized launch, and it is not centralized now. Just if it was centralized, everything would go very smoothly. So I think that they may have wanted to institute some sense of calm or predictability, that someone with such a large amount of tokens could move forward a change. But I'm not going to venture a guess of what they were, what they really were thinking. I just know that they are a token holder like anybody else.
Elliot, as a token holder, what do you think about this situation?
First of all, we want to just review the present situation of BP voting first. Is it really decentralized voting or very transparent voting? Many people say it's no, because usually the big whale voters or the exchanges, they control sometimes. That's why yesterday the 21 BP and today is 21 BP is totally different sometimes, right? So very fluctuating. Why I'm mentioning this first, because our philosophy is for the decentralization, but actually in this EOS world, it's already centralized in some case, right? So we need more very transparent voting. For example, the Huobi is supplying some voting tool for Chinese user, right? And then it's reflecting each voter's real intention, right? That is necessary for the exchange side. Secondly, speaking to the Block.one's voting, I think it's necessary because in the real capitalism world, there is invisible hand, which is mentioned by Adam Smith, because the demand and supply always is not matching. Sometimes it's a monopoly, because the monopoly issue, some government should intervene in sometimes, right? Like that, Block.one should minimize their power, but it should influence for the not extraordinary thing or not fair voting or speaking to the whole ecosystem. We have exchanges, token economy, some debt company, some investor, right? The whole player are necessary, right? Right now, we are too much focusing on the token economy only. That is the big issue of EOS ecosystem. That's why sometimes Block.one should influence in the right way based on their constitution or our agreement. That is our opinion.
Denny, anything to add about this transparency of the voting system?
Yeah, transparency. First of all, we have a traceable hash for clients to track the way faithfully to execute their vote to the block users, the bounce spot, and not just for us. And for now, you have this choice to track. And the second thing, maybe we also have the account that you can deposit and withdraw your EOS in our exchange. Actually, it's your. And everybody's saying, okay, hey, Huobi is transparent, much more transparent now, but we can still hear a lot of hostile words in the US community say exchange is not a good actor. I have no idea, because most people in the blockchain industry think the exchange is too centralized actor, and everybody has from the beginning think, hey, exchange cannot be trustable, no matter what this talk about, and in the community it is. And in fact, Block.one will also face the same situation. They have 100 million token. If we set a bar of the referendum is 10%, that means they can pass everything. They can ruin this world. So if they decide to vote, finally, eventually, we have set bar maybe 30% or 40%, but they still have a big influence in this community. They might bring this community to a good way and maybe destroy this community. We have totally no idea what is going on. That's what I'm talking about.
See, so David, do you think Block.one will eventually become a kingmaker?
I think there's a lot of dangers with Block.one voting at present with the way we are currently set up with times 30 votes. If you look at the way it would work, by them being such a large token holder, placing 100 million votes down for 30 different BPs right now effectively concentrates all of the voting power hugely upwards into that 30 they select. And they would indeed be not just the kingmaker ultimately, they would also create the sort of cliff edge relating to voting rewards that we had tried to flatten out with the move to this existing system we're on. It would in practical terms mean that we had 9 paid standbys, I believe. I think Kevin and I talked about this when this was first proposed, and he actually told me that himself, having run the math through. And that's a concern for the network. We're already having debates internally about whether or not we think, for example, about 30 paid standbys is sufficient. I think most people would agree that 9 paid standbys for a network of this size is not sufficient or sustainable long term, and to expect high quality teams to be sitting there unpaid in the long term. So that would be one point to make. I think there has to be that fundamental change out to 50 or more were that to happen. But otherwise, Block.one themselves, they have every right otherwise, in my view, to actually vote and to express an opinion on the running of the network. I don't think there should be any real contention about that, particularly. Now that the network is live, yes, they were the underlying creators of the software, and they are certainly should probably have an informed opinion on these things. I don't see it as a concern in itself. It really depends on how that power is wielded, much as any large token holder chooses to wield their power. And it really is a challenge, I think, for any of us to necessarily say it's right or wrong. It would be interesting to understand what their motivations would be for that kind of thing. I think there are some concerns. If you look, for example, at the top 21 right now, there are certain block producers in there that, for example, seem to be in breach of the BP agreements. I think there's at least one that doesn't have a working website, for example. Whether or not they're fully contactable in times of the sorts of network crises or upgrades and things, that's a real concern and valid concern that the community and block producers need to address. So you have concerns there, and obviously a token holder with much better stake as the likes of Block.one would probably exercise that and try to only select token holders they feel are in compliance. So there are multiple ways to look at this, but my biggest concern right now would be the impact that it would have in the current system with regards to not leaving enough paid standbys.
So there's another question we want to ask the block producers is, what are your opinions on the inflation rate? You're talking about the rewards and maybe the possibility of high quality block producers not being rewarded. You know, it's 1% to the block producers. What do you think about that ratio? Kevin?
What do we think about the 1% rewards?
Yeah.
So Kevin, I think the context is whether or not there's enough paid standbys, rather than whether or not rewards at the top are necessarily an issue. It's about further down.
Okay. Yeah. So it's first we need, going back to what David said, we need to establish what is an appropriate number to have for the number of standby nodes that are ready to go, because and if the answer is no, we don't have enough, we can do one of two things. We can lower, for those of you that don't know, for you to be considered a standby, you need to have at least 0.5% of the total votes, which will warrant you a 100 EOS per day payout. If you have 0.49% of the votes, you will get nothing. So you could have 99 EOS coming your way, but if it's not 100, you get nothing, and it's redistributed for everyone else. So we can lower that threshold, but if we lower that threshold, how far can we lower it until there's nothing more meaningful that can be done with it? So the purpose of a standby is so that you are standing by, you are on deck if you need to jump into the top 21. And we've seen that happen since launch. Somebody went from it was like 70 or something into the top 21, and they were asleep, and they weren't ready. So it's about being ready. So is lowering the threshold of 100? Can we lower to a point where they can still be ready and scale their network infrastructure? And if the answer is no, then the other lever that we can turn is to raise rewards for all block producers in a way that don't pay the top more, but that do pay the tail end enough that they can scale with the rest of the network. So we've seen the reward system switch 5 or 6 times leading up to launch. It used to be a bid system out of 5% total, and whatever's left over from the bid, the difference between the block producer bid and total inflation would go to the worker proposal fund. But then we saw there was a lot of fear of corruption. So to abate that corruption, Block.one said, or that possible corruption, Block.one said, okay, well, we're just going to lower the total amount of money any block producer can earn, because then those who have outsized influence and power to take control of this and take control of these funds won't care anymore. It's just not enough money to get people to care. So, you know, we've seen it change a bunch of times. You know, block producers and standby nodes should be paid for what they do. It's you know, it's my full-time job. I think it's everybody's full-time job here. But it's mostly about the security of the network and having enough standby nodes that can actually do something significant with the rewards that they receive, so that anything can happen to all of the top 21 and the network can continue. Essentially, if we can be at least redundant entirely, you know, that's good enough, and then we should see how many more we need after that.
So Elliot, any thoughts about this extension of the standby nodes, the number of nodes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as well as the
I think it's okay. Basically, we are positive about that because, of course, the 21, the BP is very outstanding. They are ready for devoting themselves, but some case it should be replaced by the standby node or standby BP. And then many players, many BP candidates are qualified enough. Actually, speaking to our case, we were among 21 in the beginning, but right now it's outside of 21, unfortunately, because of the big coin holders voting. But from our perspective, we want to devote ourselves as a real value chain devoter. For example, we can provide EOS game, and then we are based on internet company for 20 years. That's why we want to do something as a BP, but we lost the chance until now. That's why, but we will not give up. We will keep trying our role as an investor to that company and develop our own game also. So we will always be standby, but we are ready. Yeah, right. Like our case, so many players, BP candidates are qualified. So I agree with their broadening the pool of BP. Yeah.
Denny, how about you? What do you think about this extension of the standby nodes standby BPs?
BP, block producers.
Yes,
okay. You know, I think, you know, like Dan said before, we need to protect the efficiency and stability of the network, but we should figure out how many block producers we need to protect the whole network. Technically, Dan said maybe another 50, another 20 is fair enough, because we cannot replace all the block producers in one day. You know, just like, hey, it's top from 1 to 21. Then you get from 1 to maybe 22 or 23, and other BPs come up upside down. So technically, I think maybe for now the pay standby BP is already enough, but maybe we will raise the salary for the standby BP for now, because they only get a little money. They cannot have enough money to maybe add some RAMs or upgrade their facility. That is the main dangerous thing we face for the EOS system. And for other talent people, I think there is a 4% for the work proposals. They have enough money to pay for them. If, hey, I'm not now it's over 100 block producers here, and maybe I rank very low in that. Maybe I can do something else to make some new smart contract and make it pass the referendum, then you get paid. And I think the payment from this place is way much more than the salary you can get from block producers. That's what I think.
So, Elliot, sorry, just going back to you, because you mentioned that you are one of the standby BPs. Are you happy with are you happy your PR right now? Or how much do you think you can go more?
Yeah, actually we invested ourselves for our server and network initially to be a qualified BP. And then our organization is not small yet right now. So speaking to the budget and the real compensation, is of course minus. But we are positive on the EOS future, EOS ecosystem. That's why we are still keep doing investment into debt company. Until now, we have invested 5 different debt company in Korea and Singapore also. That's why speaking to the long-term evolving this ecosystem, not only the compensation from the PP1, but also we can add more value by different way, by raising service, some, for example, game or SNS, whatever it is. In the future, there are more and more debt companies come out. The thing is that right now our EOS ecosystem has some barrier, because maybe the later part of other guys will talk about the RAM issue, right? So because of the barrier, the prosperous potential debt company cannot get into this ecosystem. That is very concerning things. Yeah, the long-termly, of course, we want to be among 21 BP. If not, it doesn't matter. We will keep trying our own effort to devote ourselves as a good player in this ecosystem. Yeah, that's our future plan.
Maybe we should we'll go to our viewers and look for some questions. So one question from Vilas says, what do you think should be the goal of EOS? Maybe you guys can share a short-term goal so that we can move on to build a better ecosystem. Kevin, would you like to share?
Yeah, I think the goal of EOS is to be the first blockchain to survive contact with mass adoption, and it should be a place where decentralized applications are able to be successful and accessible by the world in accomplishing the goal of positioning the value creators in different industries back to the center of whatever industry they've been pushed to the side of. That's just one example, but it's about making a decentralized application development platform that is accessible and successful, so that we can start to connect to each other more directly and remove the middlemen that have sort of set up camp all across our digital landscape.
So maybe to pose this question to David, what do you think are the interim steps that the community has to take to reach this goal that Kevin mentioned?
The interim steps, what? In what context? Sorry.
So maybe in the approval of the constitution, or do we want to talk about ECAF first, or how? What steps? What interim steps in terms of governance do you think we need to take before we can actually embark fully on this journey towards what Kevin was saying?
Channel your inner Dan Larimer.
I mean, you're right. He's almost right on that. Yeah, we need to have a clear ideological view, I think, as a community in terms of what we're all looking to achieve here. I think Kevin summed it up well. A blockchain that actually is capable of surviving mass adoption is the underlying fundamental principle beyond what we're trying to achieve here. It's to be a commercial, scalable blockchain that enables enterprise-grade applications to be built out on it, with all of the actual benefits that we see. But to do that, it has to interact with the real world, and that means interacting with people, and it means interacting with people who have disputes. So we do need to understand, therefore, and agree exactly how those elements fit into this side of things. We have the underlying technology, which we're getting clearer and clearer with regards to how it works. There's some contention over things like the RAM market, which is another area I think you're talking about later. Yeah. But if you actually look at the governance side, this is the last piece really that requires full definition from the community, and really therefore the logical next steps on this is that we finish the debate that is underway and ratify the version that we see. We're always going to have to remain flexible and respond to problems as they become apparent. But overall, to me, that is the next logical step. You know, if we're going to actually have a blockchain that can survive that mass adoption and contact, we need to be able to handle disputes. We need to be able to, in my view, provide some level of comparable protection for people's money, tokens. In this case, if you look at them from a financial perspective as well as utility, they need to have some sort of comparable protections. Now, that can be done in a range of ways. It can be done with regards to things like insurance, or it can be done with fundamental protections, as we've seen trying to apply for theft. So the returning of potentially compromised accounts through freezing, and we've talked about that already. We need to, between ourselves, agree on exactly how we're going to implement those equivalent protections, because until that point in time, we'll never see the mass adoption of EOS that it has the potential to do, because people in the real world, many of them, would sooner keep their money in a perceived safer place than they would on a blockchain.
Can I add something to that?
Definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We also need a lot of developer tools, a lot, to make it easy, to make it streamlined, to get the knowledge out there about EOS. You know, it's important. I just want everybody that's listening to this to, yes, governance is very important, but also is all the things that we're going to build on EOS together is important as well. So EOS is really only going to be as valuable as what we build on top of it. So it's those developer tools as well, and I hope we get to talk about that in the technology panel afterwards.
Yeah, great. So Elliot, any final thoughts?
Yeah, our opinion is, so first of all, we should to lower the entrance barrier because by eliminating like speculation, for example, the RAM case. So more and more the new player, new debt company, or just a personal coin holder should enter this ecosystem. If without new user or players, this ecosystem cannot evolving into the better way. So that's why we should lower the barrier at most. And then the EOS value will be higher and higher. Right now, many people concerned about this is also just one of a coin or cryptocurrency. No, it should be very oriented, very flexible or ecosystem, so that more and more people can provide a really valuable product in this ecosystem. Secondly, as EOS is doing, we should stimulate more debt company and some valuable product to develop. If not, with EOS coin, what can we do, right? It is not just a storing asset. We should do use services, real valuable product. That should be our final goal and all the BP's final goal. That is our opinion.
Denny, how about you? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think we are talking about governance, but I won't be so optimistic because we are in the same different. We have the different language, we have different culture, we have different background. But I think in long term we will have a perfect governance, but we won't be in such a rush. We should slow down and think what we really need, and in the same time we should improve our the tools and technology. We need to upgrade our smart contract, make all the governance can be enforced, all the governments can be, have the consciousness from all the token holders that I'm thinking about. And at the same time, we should, keep the stability and efficiency of the total network. And in that case, every decentralized apps will think, hey, it's much better than Ethereum as a so transfer from Ethereum or other some chain to this one, and that will make the EOS a real enterprise operating system. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everyone for your participation. Yeah, so to our viewers, if you have any more questions for our BPs, please do feel free to reach to them at their respective social media channels after this show. There was certainly a very lively discussion, a lot of content, a lot of opinions from the various BPs about governance issues. So thanks Kevin, thanks David, thanks Elliot. Denny, we're gonna have you again for the tech part. So stay with us.
I must stay here.
Yeah, Kevin, David, Elliot, please feel free to stay and view and ask any questions. We will definitely pick your questions for the BPs that are up next.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Yes. So Corey, that was certainly a very lively discussion we had just now. What do you think is your key takeaway from the discussion?
I think the key takeaway is that governance is very difficult, and they are of course finding ways to move forward.
Yes.
And the token holders should not worry. It's a very daunting task. So we have to move on and just support the system, right?
Yeah, so Denny mentioned just now that the whole process itself is actually very actually everyone should just slow down, right? And then scope out what they really want from this constitution, and it seems that everyone should just take a breather, right? Yeah. It seems that they're just too fast. They say a day in blockchain is like a year in real life, but maybe things should really slow down.
Okay, so before we move on to the second part, we'd like to remind you that there is a contest going on, an airdrop for our viewers. From now till the 9th of July, if you share your insights, summarize and review this episode on Medium or Steemit, the top 5 articles with the most number of likes will win 100 USDT worth of tokens. So that's the 9th of July, Monday. Share your insights and summary of this episode on Medium and Steemit, and the top 5 articles with the most number of likes will win 100 USDT worth of tokens. So you can check out the more information in the link below in this episode.
Great, thanks, Corey, for reminding us that. So we actually touched a little bit about what's up in the next discussion just now, mainly about this RAM trading.
Yes.
Wow. What do you think? What's your take on this the surge in RAM prices? Just now we mentioned it jumped like 1,400%. Yeah.
There are beneficial parts of it where you can make money off, but sort of there can be RAM hogging. It's detrimental to the system, which in the end it's bad for everybody. Right?
Yes. It sounds that way. I think one of the things that we are very fearful of is that in this RAM trading itself, is it manipulated by invisible hands? I think there was mention about invisible hands in the discussion just now. So it's something that I think we want to ask our block producers that will be coming on later. So we have so we have 3 block producers who will be joining us for the upcoming segment. Maybe you'd like to just give a brief introduction.
Okay, so we have EOS Asia Da Feng, the co-founder of EOS Asia. We have EOS DAC, Luke Stoke, who is part of the launch team. And again, he's back again, EOS Sphere, Ross from, he's the founder of EOS Sphere.
Yeah.
And of course, we have Denny Wu from the Huobi Mining Pool, who will be joining us again as the moderator, and he's the operations manager in Huobi Mining Pool.
Yeah. Yes, cool. So I think
someone's joining us.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Do we have someone with us right now?
Yeah, I think we're all here.
Wow,
right.
Cool. Everyone's here. So maybe we just go around the table. Luke, could you just give a brief intro?
Sure, yeah. My name is Luke Stokes, and as mentioned, I'm part of the launch team for EOS DAC. I'm also a Steam witness, so I've been a block producer on another blockchain for over a year.
Rob, how about Ross?
Hey, I'm Ross Dold from EOSphere based in Australia. I'm co-founder of EOSphere, and I also have a Steam witness, and I've been involved with BitShares and Steam, other graphene-based technologies over the last few years.
And how about Dafeng?
Hi, so my name is Dafeng. I'm the co-founder of EOS Asia. Before EOS Asia, I started a Y company, the back company called Strikingly.
Cool. And of course, we have Denny from Huobi Mining Pool. Hi, Denny. Good to see you.
Hi, my name is Denny. I'm I think I won't do more introduction about myself because I'm here. And what I think. Another thing is about the $100 about your rewards. So that's all. Thank you for coming here, everybody.
Just before we get into discussion, when someone's speaking, just mute your mics just so that we don't have any disruption. Thank you. Okay, so right, we have this RAM trading issue. And,
yes.
Would anyone like to start first? Luke, would like to share about your thoughts about this RAM trading?
Yeah, it's a really complicated topic actually, because it's not like a normal market where you'd have just buyers and sellers as you'd expect. There's a limited supply of RAM, and so they have something called the Bancor protocol. It's just Bancor relay that essentially makes a market maker situation where they set the price and they kind of allow people that want to buy into that price to have liquidity. Unfortunately, and Dan just posted about this today, it might be yesterday your time, I guess, depending on how that works out. Yeah. That there was it sounds like there was a problem with the way it was actually configured. It was supposed to, a certain setting was supposed to be 50%, turned out to be 0.5%, and so, or 0.05%. So there are some issues with how things have been working as far as the RAM price in this market and whether it's been functioning the way it was designed to function. So there's been a lot of speculation. You have a lot of people buying up RAM in ways that they're not even using it. And so to kind of back up a little bit, what the RAM is used for, what it's important for on the EOS blockchain is to be able to do airdrops. So if you want to give someone a token, they need to have RAM on their account to store that token. And if you want to do an application that wants to store data that you need to view in your application, data that you can't query the entire blockchain to calculate in real time because it would be too slow and use up too much CPU, then you have to store it in RAM. And so as RAM gets really expensive, it becomes very difficult for application developers to build useful applications.
Great. Dafeng, would you like to share your thoughts?
Right, so actually there's a recent change that drastically reduced the price of RAM. And I think that is a very new update. And but RAM price will, I think in the long run will continue to go up because it's always a finite resource, and it's limited by how much it's a physical limit of the servers. So there's only so much RAM you can put in one single server. But I think in the long term solution will be dApp developers, they need to architect their dApp so that it's more memory efficient and use as little RAM as possible. And for us, when we did one of our apps, we have a use case. When we have to store a massive amount of data, and so instead of storing them in memory, in the main chain, we actually created a second layer chain to store that piece of data. So I think dApp developers will have to consider their architecture and see what can be fit in the RAM of the main chain. And I think second way to solve it, which Dan touched it in the last conference call with all the VPs, is in the long term, there will be many side chains, and these side chains, since each chain has a finite RAM, but we can create many side chains that will increase the total supply of the RAM across the entire network. So I think in the future, there's just going to be a lot of side chains.
How about Denny? Any thoughts on?
Yes, I think definitely is right, because when RAM price going up, we will have too many. But in long term, we will have many side chains. But for now, in long terms, the RAM price will still going up. So I think it's time to figure out how can we make the RAM price just keep very in the place and make everybody can predict how much is 1 KB of the price of RAM. So maybe we need to make them say wait, when the price is going up, we add some RAM or find some way to make the price going down. That's what I think about. But in long term, of course, I agree with Stefan's, two-man side chains to solve this problem.
And Ross, any thoughts?
I think that when Block.one were developing the EOS platform, they recognized that there was going to be this rare resource, which is RAM, finite resource, and that's the reason why they decided to actually create this market. Started off with really good intentions. Obviously, what's happened of late is the speculators have got on and they started buying up RAM, making a big land grab, and probably affecting the guys that actually really need to use the RAM. I think we've already sold like 54 gigs when I last saw, and I think it's only a few gigs that are actually being used. Yeah. But on the lines of what the other guys have just said, now there are a few interesting little solutions that have come out in maybe the last 12 hours. The first one was obviously Dan saying that there was a weight change to the Banco algorithm that he needs to do, and I had a good laugh about it because as he releases that statement, immediately the price of RAM drops. So he wants to adjust it to 0.05% to prevent some of the slippage, and the way I understand it, it's going to give it a bit of a slow-moving buffer. He also said that maybe we should be increasing the RAM week by week, month by month, or whatever it is at a specific rate. Obviously, that'll create a greater amount of RAM for the market and maybe keep the price a little bit more stable. But we can't go crazy with suddenly saying everybody needs 2 terabytes of RAM inside all their nodes. It'll be nuts. But something that he mentioned in his article that was really, really interesting, and I'll be honest, as far as myself not being a hardcore developer, maybe coding a bit smarter, that maybe we could use SSD, maybe we can use Optane, some kind of high performance storage mechanism that isn't RAM, that can scale to multiple terabytes. Somehow managing the actual state database a little bit better, that could really give a lot more of a amount of RAM available to anybody that wants to develop on the EOS platform. Another one was what the Bancor guys said. They also released an article. They said something about burning 11.5% worth of EOS out of the RAM contract each month, and because of that burn, it would deflate the price, and it would probably incentivize people to sell. Yeah.
I could talk on that a little bit, yeah. And I watched a little video of some explanation of how the Bancor algorithm works that helped me understand a little bit better. And it was kind of described as a pie chart split in the middle. Half is EOS, half is RAM. And based on the way the algorithm works, it's always trying to keep those things the same. And as soon as you have a little bit more EOS, you start to, you can imagine that kind of shifting the other way. Now you've got a little more EOS and a little less RAM, well, the price will adjust accordingly. And so what they were talking about is if you decrease the amount of EOS, you will actually, the way the algorithm works, it'll try to adjust and make people buy more RAM, essentially making the RAM price cheaper. And it was just so counterintuitive, not the way people normally think of a supply and demand system, but that's kind of one of the ways that the Bancor algorithm works. And explaining it that way, it was really interesting to me. I was like, oh wait, so if we decrease the amount of RAM or the amount of EOS we have sitting in that market maker account, it will actually try to decrease the price of RAM, or to make more people buy RAM. So that's one interesting idea as well. And another thing that's really important, and a lot of people that have been doing delegated proof of stake for a while understand this, that we don't want to make it expensive to run a full node. And this is a really important point about security on a DPoS system. And so every time we add RAM, even if it's just 1 extra gig of RAM, that now gets multiplied across every single node. And that really increases the whole price of the network to run the network. And we don't want to make barriers of entry for more nodes, because the more nodes we have, the more decentralization we have, the more resiliency we have, the more secure our network is going to be. So that's an important point in the whole discussion, that even though we can add RAM, it's not necessarily a good idea, especially when we can provably show it's not being used. In the future, it might be more difficult to know whether or not it's being used. And if we tried to build something based on usage, it would fail because people could just fake it. They could just write 1s and 0s to the RAM all the time. That wouldn't really tell us much at all. Another thing I want to mention too that I just found out, right before this call, I was reading it, Scott from Greymass, NEX, he's got a potential proposal that he shared with a few people, and I asked him if I could talk about it here, and he said it was okay to, which is like a lease ID. This is, yeah, it's a version 2. He had a previous one as well. He's got a new proposal that is more based on the amount of EOS you have staked, similar to CPU and bandwidth, where if you've got a lot of EOS staked, you could potentially use a bit of RAM more with this idea of a disk, this read-only disk behind the scenes, just like you were saying, Ross, this multiple terabytes. You could have 6 terabytes or more of just disk. And whenever you're swapping out essentially between hot and cold, and the stuff you're not needing to write to all the time can just be in this read-only cold situation. But the stuff that you're writing to all the time, you need to keep in memory. This is a beautiful idea because that's the architecture of how computers work. And so if we follow that proven architecture, we might have a better solution. So I'm looking forward to him introducing that. I wonder what Dan and Block.one will say to it. But I do think there are some technical things we can do, not just outside of the market maker side of things, that could improve this whole situation.
If we have that idea, if we use a slower version of storage, that will increase the CPU usage as well as decrease the TPS of the overall system. I think that will be
well. His model's a little different. It's actually kind of a little similar to what Ross was saying in terms of high availability disk. So that would be one thing that's important for that. But it's a little bit different than if you wanted to read that data, then you actually have to have enough RAM to pull it out of the disk again into RAM. So it's the idea that, normal RAM, once you turn it off the machine, you lose it, right? It has to be written to disk. Right. So just like a machine, if you want to actually access it and use it for a contract, then you have to have enough RAM at that moment to read it out of disk. But stuff that you're not accessing every minute, stuff that's just sitting there maybe a month later, you're going to read it, there's no reason to have it in hot RAM.
Some kind of smart cache.
Exactly.
Yeah, Dan was saying that most... Sorry.
If that's the case, if the data is not being used for like months, then they shouldn't be in RAM.
Yeah,
I agree. Absolutely, and that's kind of the problem.
Make it so.
Yeah, exactly.
Dan said that most of the data that's stored in memory actually doesn't need to even be there, right? So it's all about developing a little bit smarter about it. I think there's something we need to just mention to all the Huobi viewers. That might not have been caught on from the beginning. The whole reason why we're having this discussion is every single node in the network has an identical copy of data inside of its RAM, right? So it's not like we've got, a whole million terabytes of RAM across the world, right? We only can have as much memory as we can in one server, right? One node on the network. I think that kind of gets lost.
Yeah, I remember seeing a Telegram chat from somebody. He's saying that why is the RAM more expensive than going to Best Buy? Somewhere you can. It will definitely be more expensive than that. I have to guarantee that because that every piece of data stored in RAM is replicated across all the servers of BPs of full nodes, and it's very, very expensive. But right now it's hyper volatile because of speculation and all this.
And not only that, RAM is so expensive these days. I don't know what happened. I mean, it's been a while since I had to go and buy some memory, but wow, it costs a fortune for DDR4 these days.
I actually heard they're coming out DDR5 or something like that. This new technology coming out, right? Anyone knows about it?
Yeah. There's always another one, right?
Yeah, always another one, yeah.
There's always something right around the corner. Yeah. It's coming out next week, always.
Okay, so maybe we can just get your opinions about the current pricing level. Do you think that there needs to be something done right now to adjust such that it's something that is more palatable for app developers?
I think this is something I've been trying to get at from the very beginning to say, what is the target price we're going for? I think Dan and others have kind of argued that there is no way to do that. It's completely free market. It's all open. But I get a little concerned by that because I don't see it as a normally functioning free market. We don't have the ability to do futures contracts. We don't have the ability to short the market. We don't have competing ways of, there's not the supply and demand that you'd see in a functioning market. So I feel like we kind of have to rationally say, what is the target price that we as a community like? And the only way I know of to do that right now is to compare against competing chains. How much does it cost to run on Ethereum? How much does it cost to run on Neo or some of these other chains? And from that argument, I've heard people say, well, $100 account is fine because as soon as you do a handful of transactions, you're going to pay for the account because it would be more expensive on other ones. I don't know that I buy that argument completely, especially when you compare it during a really unique time in Ethereum where it's like $4 a transaction, because that's not the norm. So to me, I think it's important that we all kind of come together and say, what is reasonable? And the only way I know to do that is data-driven analysis. And so I would like to hear a lot more from actual application developers to say, hey, look, we want to use EOS. Here's our budget. Here's what we're willing to do. If we cannot do this, we're going elsewhere because we have other options, including not even using a blockchain. So,
and saying that, how many, all the developers that I've spoken to, they have no idea how much RAM they actually need, right? There's this big gray area, but they haven't even speculated because they don't know if they need 1 meg or 512 megs. Who knows, right? They need to actually start to stretch their legs and putting some applications and smart contracts out there to measure what it's going to actually require.
Yeah, and on that note, EOS DAC, I mean, we needed 30 megs for our airdrop plus, or I said 30 megabytes for our airdrop plus another 110 for creating all the accounts that didn't hold EOS, but did hold EOS DAC. Well, we promised them that they would get their tokens. So in order to do that, we had to create thousands of accounts, and that's just gifted to them essentially. So it can be really expensive if you're doing an application that involves onboarding new accounts.
Definitely, sorry. Definitely, you are a DApp developer, right? So maybe you can give us some idea about what's your reasonable pricing.
Right. So So one of the things that we've been doing among the Chinese BPCs is actually we had a chat about it, and because different DApp developers, when they have issues with RAM and technical issues, they go to the BPs, right? Because they know that we're more savvy about the EOS software. And we have been collecting some data. I don't have it to share with you yet in this meeting, but I can share it with the community at large later on once we have more data. One of the things that I like to benchmark it with other chains, like what Luke said, but I think benchmarking it with Ethereum is not that important, because what the EOS software, or at least a lot of people are promising about EOS software, is like you can get enterprise level operating system, and that's what the name's called, right? You can get fast TPS, free transaction, and now these DApp developers, when they're doing the research, they realize that, wait, if I want to move my 1 million accounts that I have on a different app that is not on blockchain, now they're exploring this, and they realize that, oh shit, this is just too much money. This and it is not what the software promised them or before, and they just had a great hesitation of going further. So and we've been talking to them about other solutions. Can we create a side chain for you just for your DApp, because you have so many users, and we can explore a different RAM market there. We don't need this crazy volatile market there. And a lot of the VPs in China are very welcoming to this type of idea, because if there is such DApp and wanted to use EOS, we want to help this DApp developer to make it happen, and not having him explore other options, because we know that this is the best software available in blockchain right now. So that's something that we're doing right now. Unfortunately, there's not enough data points yet, because this is so early, and the RAM price also just dramatically dropped. We don't know where it's heading right now at the moment. So we're still collecting data. We're still observing at the moment.
I had a question about those sidechains. You mentioned that earlier. Are these going to be more or less private chains that you will run directly, or are you going to have multiple block producers involved in protecting those chains and decentralizing them?
So we are more looking to have multiple block producers running them. And these are DApp developers, and they're not good at running the BPs for their chains. So, but we do have that type of expertise, and we do want to help them to onboard to the EOS software. So, but there's no definite plan yet. But this is something, an idea that is quite welcome in the Chinese BP community.
I think it would be a cool thing to allow the backups that aren't currently producing on EOS to have an opportunity to start producing on some of these sidechains. That would be very cool.
Yeah,
that would be cool. From what Dan said the other day, even though he's whiteboarded technically how a sidechain is going to work, he said that it hasn't been architected exactly yet. So the EOS mainnet or the EOS software IO platform at the moment doesn't support that kind of smart contract integration to the sidechain. Is that right? That's right.
Right. So there's no current IBC available. So this is one area why plans like this will take a little bit more time to figure out the technical details. First of all, we wanted to make sure that when the IBC come out, the side chain will be able to talk to the main chain. That would be like the most ideal case. But how do we prepare for that? Yeah. And at the same time, we can't be telling the dApp developers like, hey, just hold on, don't use EOS until when IBC is ready. So we're still in a very early phase of figuring out for them. And our goal as Chinese VPCs, the few that we talk to, is we want to make sure that the dApp developers, they don't go on to other blockchain solution because of this RAM issue. That is not what we want to see. And we also understand that the RAM price on the main chain right now is, it's not that easy to change. And maybe if it goes down to a point, it's still too expensive for some of the app developers when they have millions of users. And this is like China scale, right? So we have to figure out something for them.
Okay, so we have some questions from the viewers, and I'd like to direct this question to Dafeng again. They're asking if what are your thoughts about DPoS and vote buying? Dafeng?
Oh, okay. This is a tricky question. So I actually think that providing incentives for, like economic incentives, like kickbacks for voting, is like a very simple thought of encouraging people to participate more. But if you think about it more deeply, vote buying will really just quickly degrades to a race to the bottom on which BP can provide the most kickback, and not which BP can provide the most stable infrastructure to produce blocks or to contribute positive stuff to the ecosystem. And so if you think about it a little bit deeper, vote buying is just going to hurt the ecosystem. And so I think for any voter who thinks about it a little bit more, will not engage in vote buying. Vote buying is also not allowed in the current constitution. Now, the question is, how do we enforce it? But I think given that all the data, all the vote data is transparent and can be analyzed, and we have seen a lot of good tools in the community that's built to provide clarity over the voting process and voting data. I believe that this will provide enough data for the governance side to enforce banning of vote buying. With that said, I do think that we should provide some type of incentive for people who actively participate in voting, but not in the form of vote buying. I was thinking that, for example, if a dApp is doing airdrop, maybe the dApp can consider to only airdrop to people who stake their token and vote for, I don't know, like X number of BPs. So I think these are a type of incentive that we can provide to the active participants of the EOS ecosystem, but it's not a form of vote buying. You don't have to vote for any particular BP. You just have to stake your token, vote. So this is the type of incentives like EOS Asia is actually actively researching and brainstorming about.
Okay. So Ross, for you, I have a question. The question from the viewers is that what are your thoughts on proof of work, proof of stake, and DPoS? Like, can you mention the benefits and disadvantages for all of them? Yeah.
I know Luke must be chomping at the bit there because he's got a lot of opinions on this. Let me give you mine. So, proof of work, arguably probably the first consensus mechanism would be what you would see in Bitcoin and Ethereum and Litecoin as such at this point in time, which pretty much says that whoever is able to put the most amount of hash power would be able to solve the specific proof for a block, right? Which would make you the block producer. Typically, that means whoever has access to the most infrastructure and the cheapest power, they will be the producers that will be able to sign that block. What typically happens with proof of work is everybody pools their resources into mining pools, and then what will happen is you essentially don't have much decentralization. For instance, Bitcoin's got like 4 main pools essentially calling the shots on the Bitcoin platform. Proof of stake is an interesting one, which is it benefits whoever's got the most amount of coins or tokens, where you can stake them so that you won't be able to transfer them. But because you have staked them, locked them up, and have the most amount, then when the round comes for you to sign that block, you'll have more of a chance of signing that block. So typically it favors the people that have the most amount of coins or tokens. Delegated proof of stake is obviously what we use with EOS and with Steemit and with BitShares, which is essentially the electing of your preferred witness, delegate, or block producer in order to put them into the top 21 to be able to sign the blocks. If you think about it, out of all of them, this one has, or in my opinion, is certainly the most decentralized way of actually doing some kind of consensus mechanism, where you essentially can vote for anybody with however little amount of tokens that you have, and essentially it's like more of a, I don't know, everyone hates it when you say it, but it's almost like an election, maybe a little bit more demographic way of choosing who's going to actually sign the block. So yeah, delegated proof of stake is definitely something I'm behind, and I've been a firm believer and follower of the graphene technology for years now.
And Luke would like to share.
Yeah,
like an explanation, Luke.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was fantastic. I'm also a really big fan of delegated proof of stake. I first got into Bitcoin in 2013 in January. So I watched this whole process happen. I watched the fork in I think it was May or March in 2013 when Bitcoin had a forking issue because of the block size. And then I saw the block size debate go on from 2014 all the way to 2015, 16, and 17. And I saw this lack of on-chain governance. I saw the users being in conflict with the block producers. Where the block producers wanted to increase the fees, they had a financial incentive to have high fees, and the users were like, "Hey, this is not the Bitcoin we signed up for." We expected nearly free transactions anywhere in the world, and so there was a lot of conflict that happened there. And it was very difficult for them to solve. Now, the user-issued hard fork was kind of an interesting idea where if you had a node, you could then vote with your node even if you weren't an actual miner. So they had to do a lot of crazy stuff to try and get around that problem of misaligned incentives. So when I look at delegated proof of stake, I get very excited about it because the actual users, the holders of the tokens that use the tokens, have the ability to align their incentives with the block producers who then want to serve them well. And those who serve the users the best get voted in by those users. And another analogy I like to use that I think is interesting is with proof of work. And I'm a huge fan of proof of work. I think, I think it's very secure and it costs a lot of money to do it. So there's a point behind it, but it's also very wasteful. So it's like asking 10,000 people to go do some work, and then 10 minutes later, you throw away 9,999 of the answers. Even though they were correct, you just throw it all away and you give the reward to one guy and then you say, everyone start over again. And you do that every 10 minutes. And this is just very wasteful. And it's kind of wasteful on purpose in a sense. But with delegated proof of stake, to me, it's this cooperation, this collaboration over just kind of wasteful competition. And I like to call it like healthy competition. We're still competing. We're still trying to get those votes and provide the most value. But we're doing it in such a way where we're coordinated together, where it's very efficient. You go, then I go, then the next person goes. And it's done in a way that is in alignment with the incentive of the token holders. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And as you mentioned, Ross, proof of stake has some concerns as well, because kind of in some ways, depending on the inflation of the token, the rich just keep getting richer. And again, they may not be in alignment with all the token holders. Whereas with delegated proof of stake, you can set up proxies, you can get whole communities together, even a bunch of small token holders can have a huge impact if they coordinate together and say, hey, here's what we want. And the block producers have to listen.
Just a quick one before you go over to Defang. Well, an interesting way of looking at it is something that Kevin Rose actually said to me a while back, where in proof of work, everybody's competing with the most amount of hash power. In proof of stake, everybody's competing with who's got the most amount of tokens or coins. In delegated proof of stake, the block producers are all competing for who can add the most value to the network so that they'll get votes from the community. So it's like it's a fighting to do most good.
So for Tafeng, my question would be, firstly, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think I echo most of what Rose and Luke said. One thing I want to emphasize more is, I think Luke touched it a little bit, is the depots or delegated proof of stake allow us to evolve the software way faster than any of the algorithm before. And I don't know if some of the viewers know, from the day that we launched the software to today, we actually patched the software multiple times without people knowing it and without any disruption or all those things. That is because it makes things significantly easier when the voters already choose who they trust, who are contributing, who are technically capable, and who want to upgrade the software for the benefit of the ecosystem. And this is none of us are affiliated with Block.one, and because people trust us and because we want to do great things about the ecosystem, we will together upgrade the protocol. And this is very important because this is a very early stage of the software, and we'll be anticipating more changes in the future. And just imagine this type of changes happening on Ethereum or Bitcoin. It will take a long time to get them done.
Yeah. So the question would be, do you think proof of work and proof of stake will die out, or will there be an ecosystem of multiple types of consensus?
I think proof of work, like Luke said, it's more secure. So I think for certain industries, maybe they want it. I'm not 100% sure. I'm very for depots as well. So, when you had an experience with depots, you will not go back anymore. So, but I'm not in a position to judge whether something will die out or not. I'm not sure. I'm also observing, but I'm an active champion of depots.
How about Denny? Any thoughts?
There's there are 2 billion section in your department. The mining section is someone just favored a proof of work. It works this way, and of course, I'm a huge fan of the depots. I'm here. So actually, like Dafeng's side, I think it's Lucas' side. The proof of work is much secure, and depots is much efficiency, and they won't waste so much money. We work one by one, and hey, I am the good one. I have technology, and people will vote for me. Just believe me, and we will do best to the community. This make us can develop from 0 to the 100. And Bitcoin Ethereum is good. It's perfect, but they won't change. Maybe they will change, but it's very slow. But for us, all the block users and talent people make upgrade the smart contract, do some protocol and up government. So maybe we are not that good now, but in such a long term, maybe in short time, we will be the best. I think that is.
Another point I wanted to make that I think is an interesting one, when we talk about Byzantine fault tolerance, which is essentially a way that we can know that the data that we're looking at is accurate and everyone agrees around the world at that data that we have consensus. With proof of work algorithms, it's a little bit interesting how easy many of them are to attack with a 51% attack. You could have this mining farm that's hashing away, but not, and they're solving blocks, but they're not releasing them. And then they could just flood the network with a whole bunch of these solved blocks if they were able to maybe segment the network or prevent other miners from communicating well enough, and they could stay ahead of them. So you could have, in theory, way later, all of a sudden a fork, and now the new chain, the longest chain is some new chain. And that could cause double spends and things like that. So I've heard some arguments that there isn't this concept of a last irreversible block like we have in delegated proof of stake. And that's a really interesting idea to ponder, in that in our blockchain, there is a point where you can just say, we absolutely know that this can't change. There is no somewhere else where somebody could be mining blocks and someday introduce them to the point where we might have a problem. So I think that's an actual really beautiful thing about the security of delegated proof of stake. And also too, the arguments that I've heard where the fact that you can't change it is a feature, where they say, yeah, we don't want it to be easy to change. That's the whole point. We don't want someone to be able to, move our money or do things that we don't like. But at the same time, as the Fang said, we've made security updates since the initial launch, and that's an important thing to be able to move quickly on and have consensus within all the different block producers. So I think it goes both ways. I think there are some concerns with the governance and how people are not used to, for example, a token contract that can be modified, where you can just like create new tokens or do all kinds of things. We could just steal someone's tokens. People aren't used to that yet. And I've talked about that a little bit in some of my videos, and I want to talk about it more, where I really think we as a community have to educate people on this, where they need to have either those keys burned or they need to have those keys in a multi-sig so that the token contracts can be trusted. They're not going to be changed after they're initially launched. So there are some things that DPoS makes it a little bit easy to do things that people aren't used to. So
actually, the other day I was looking at the last erasable block and how fast the EOS ecosystem is actually creating blocks. And what comes to mind to me is what happens if you realize there's some issue with a certain block, and then you have already gone, you guys are creating blocks pretty fast. So the last erasable block is already gone past it. I think what happens if there's an issue with a block that has been gone past?
Well, yeah, I can give an example of that because it just happened a couple of days ago on the Steam blockchain. We had a bug in the system, and I was up for about 24 hours with the rest of the block producers. It was an amazing day. But there was a transaction that got added to the blockchain that shouldn't have been, and it was an operation that initiates 7 days later. And so as soon as it happened, there was a check to make sure, hey, this is not supposed to happen. So the entire blockchain froze. Every single block producer stopped and crashed on this saying, we can't do this. This is wrong. So it kind of depends on what the situation is. If it's a serious issue, like somebody's trying to print tokens out of nothing or something like that, then when consensus is lost, the blockchain freezing is actually a great thing. Then you don't have forks, you don't have like a Ethereum and the the DAO attack where you're just like, okay, what do we do now? Now we have to fork it to fix it, that kind of thing. We can just pause, go back to set a last irreversible block, and then go forward. So this happened on crypto lines during the test nets and different things where something might break, and we can actually go back and say, okay, we're going to all agree via consensus that we're going to set a specific irreversible block and then fix things going forward. So there's some cool tools that we can use that I don't think other systems can use as easily.
Cool. So there's actually a number of sentiments from our viewers that this whole DPoS protocol is concentrating power too much in the few. So maybe I just go around the table. I just want to know what is your opinion, and what do you think would be legitimate safeguards that will help that will prevent such an occurrence of maybe having too much power in the few. Maybe we start with Ross.
Well, I think for a start, if token holders are concerned about too much central power, then they should go out and vote. They should go and stake their tokens, which are probably staked already at this point, and actually use one of the multitudes of platforms to actually have their voice heard. I accept that when the chain was launched, typically it was just the most technically competent guys that were familiar with the CLI about how to vote and etc. But yeah, there are a few portals out there, and yeah, they're safe and secure, and there's great wallets and Chrome extensions like Scatter that you can use to keep your keys safe on your PC. And yeah, if you want to ensure that there's no as sort of centralized power, then you need to have your voice heard.
But there's always this possibility that there are some actors in the blockchain that lobby and successfully garner influence over 51% of your token holders. Now then the other 49% gets disadvantaged in that sense. So maybe, yeah, so Dafa, I see that you're smiling there. Maybe you have something that you want to say about this? Yeah.
I think if you're talking about centralization, like if you can compare the mining pools of Bitcoin, it's the centralization there is actually way more crazier than 21 different block producers. I remember last time I checked, it's like 7 different mining pools have the biggest power, and a few of them combined can already create a 51% attack. So I think 21 is a great number. you're saying if somebody can lobby 51% of the voter, wow, that
would be amazing. I don't think that's even possible.
Amazing, yeah. I don't think that even happened for like, United Nations, for example. That didn't even happen, right? So I don't think that is achievable. I don't think that's achievable. And even then, because the token holders are the people who have the power to vote, just like Ross said, if you figure out that there's too much central power in some area, you are the person who can create that diversity. Vote for block producers that maybe geographically diverse, maybe they express different type of opinion, and since there are so many block producers, right? There's not just 21 block producers you can vote from. There's hundreds of them, and there's also proxy voting. So if you don't think that you have the best knowledge to vote, there are a lot of people who have very good knowledge of all the block producers. You can delegate, you can proxy to them. So you trust them, and you trust their knowledge of the entire ecosystem, and they can help you to vote. So really, if you're worried about that, you should just go out and proxy your vote, or vote for block producers that can create a diversity in the ecosystem.
Luke, anything to add about that?
Yeah, I would say those are great answers. And another thing too, and I don't want to plug our thing too much, but that's kind of what we're about as EOS Stack. We're a decentralized, community-owned block producer, and I'm really proud of that. That means that our members actually own and have influence over our system. We're going to have, via our constitution, we have 12 custodians that are voted in by EOS Stack token holders, and they get to influence an entire block producer, and we're still in the top 21, which is great. And so basically all those token holders, all those passionate members who want to see decentralized autonomous communities, want to see DACs spread throughout the world, they get to have their voice heard. And I think a lot of other kind of communities like that, we'll start to see that in the future, where they're going to be representatives of larger communities, where they kind of represent these smaller token holders. For, as an example, like the last time I checked, we in all the top 21, we actually had the highest percentage of small token holders voting for us. And that made me very proud. We're not just there based on one or two individual people who say, well, I have a lot of money, or I represent a lot of money, so therefore I get to decide. We represent a lot of people that say, hey, we like what you're doing. We like the tools that you're bringing. We like the vision you have to spread DACs and the technical know-how you have. So to me, I think that as has already been said, there's over 100 different block producers you can choose from. And we all represent different passions and different visions for how we want to improve the EOS ecosystem and how we want to serve the users. So I think there's a lot of decentralization in the system. And just as already been said, when people talk about centralization and DPoS, I kind of look at the data and I say, well, look at these mining farms. Sure, you could do a user initiated hard fork like they've done on Bitcoin. That's very difficult, and not everybody runs a full node like on Bitcoin. That's also very expensive. And this it's important. The more expensive these nodes get to run, the more you're going to get centralization. So this relates to our RAM conversation earlier. We want to keep those prices low so we can have a lot of different diversity as far as the block producers.
Great. So Denny, sorry, any thoughts about this?
Yeah, of course. A lot of people are explaining the theory why with DPoS has much decentralized than the POW. And I want to add something as an example. We are the biggest exchange, and we have too many clients, and only some percentage of our clients vote for us. So some big mining pool can almost control the industry. And for us, as long as we are the biggest exchange, we still have to work hard and struggle to keep us in the top 21. And nobody in this industry has the power to lobby more than 51%. And another thing we want to add is about do some basic math. As a block user, top block users for us, we only get paid maybe 1,000 US per day. And if you want to, just be yourself and buy some votes and get into top 21, you at least need more than maybe 20 million. I'm just do the basic math. It takes you about lower return and lower yield to return. Then you invest on the Treasury bill from the United States of America government. That is ridiculous. So someone just want to top block producers, they need to invest on the Treasury bill or Treasury notes and other investment. Maybe stock of Apple, they will get more return from the stock. So all things we can do to become the block producer means, hey, I am the best. I will provide the best technology. We have the best tech team. We will upgrade a smart contract. That what say. That's all. Thank you.
So it sounds like there's a very valiant defense for DPoS here. All four of you are very big fans of DPoS, and actually, from a personal standpoint, I also think that DPoS is a very is a good mechanism to adopt. Now, I think Luke, you were mentioning something about you mentioned about wanting to keep RAM prices low. We're going to revisit RAM again. So is it a dichotomy? You know, you have EOS goal of free transactions on the platform, but at the same time, on the other hand, you have a free market or a possibly regulated market with RAM. So how does this reconcile? And do you think that ultimately it would fulfill the EOS objective?
It's a great question. When we start talking about something being free, I think it's really important to remember that on a blockchain, nothing can be free, really free. If anything is free, the blockchain will be corrupted immediately. That's an attack vector. If I could create free accounts, if I can do free transactions, if there's no limits to what I can accomplish on a blockchain, then anyone would just set up a script and they'll have 100 botnets just destroying the blockchain and it'll be over with. So everything has to cost something. And the way we get around that on EOS is you have to stake your tokens for CPU, stake your tokens for bandwidth, and as you start using up more than your allotted amount, you get restricted. So that one account may have to pause, and everyone else keeps going, and there's no problem. And when it comes to RAM, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, Scott from Greymass, his second version proposal might be a potential solution where it follows a similar model, where if you have a lot of EOS, you have the ability to use a lot of RAM because you're the most invested in the system, but you're probably not going to be using it all the time. Not everyone's going to be using all the RAM all the time, meaning all the RAM they could use. So I think we're just going to have to keep iterating with it. We're going to have to keep working through the best possible solutions to accomplish the intended goal. And I really do think the intended goal is for the RAM to be used by applications to benefit EOS holders and EOS users. And another part of this too that I think we haven't talked on much is that EOS itself is really a protocol. It's not so much a cryptocurrency or a blockchain like we've seen before. It's like a new internet. I described it as like the Amazon Web Services of blockchain technology. It's where applications and businesses are going to go to when they want to be on the blockchain. So they may not even care so much about we don't talk about TCP/IP or all these other protocols that's handling this video streaming we're doing right now, but it's all under the hood. So I imagine in the future, we're going to have a lot of applications and new interesting things we can't even imagine. Just like when the internet came out and the last mile problem was solved and we have this high-speed bandwidth available to us, all these new amazing technologies came out of it. So I think once a lot of people are using EOS as a protocol and they're building cool stuff on top of it, we'll have a much better understanding of how the RAM, the CPU, and the bandwidth are going to be used and what the pricing mechanisms are going to be. Because once there's a new technology that you can only do on a decentralized, non-violent consensus blockchain like EOS that's high performant and enterprise ready, then we're really going to have price discovery. When people are like, oh man, it may cost $1 million, but I don't care because this is the only place I can do this cool new thing I want to do. I can't wait to see that. And I think that'll be helpful. In that case, we might even be driving the hardware markets to improve the price of RAM across the board because we're all just saying, hey, we've got a real reason for it. So I'm excited about the future. It's one of those things that we kind of have to see, how are we going to make it free or back to what the original intent was? We'll see.
How about a quick thought? Voting for RAM. I don't know. Do you think it's got a good idea? Luke? When
you say voting for RAM, do you mean voting as like
vote your dApps, the dApps that you like, because they need the RAM. So you vote for the dApps that you are the popular ones that need the RAM. I don't know. Could be a possible idea.
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea for the applications that are built on the platform to actually be applications people want, and so hopefully the free market will do that to some degree, right? If someone's going to be saying, "Hey, I've got this great application, you should come use it," and nobody uses it, well, they're clearly going to waste their RAM. I think we have a bigger problem right now with just speculators. They're just buying RAM and not using it at all. Clearly, any application's better than that, right?
Yeah. So maybe Ross, some final thoughts from yourself.
Final thoughts. Well, I think touching on the conversation that was had in the first session, I don't think it was intentional, but it was all about block producers being the top 21, and then you had these backups that were waiting just to produce blocks. Yeah. It's so much more than that. The EOS ecosystem and community of block producers, all of them run nodes that are public facing. All of them keep a dynamic mesh across the whole globe. All of them have nodes that provide an API interface for other dApps. All of them are involved in the community. All of them try and grow adoption of the EOS platform. And we're all trying to get dApp developers to bring their dApps across to EOS because it's a business-friendly platform, because it has things such as depots, etc. So I think it's important to realize that it's not just about the top 21 and actually signing of the blocks, which is obviously an important function, but it's very, very important that we keep the ecosystem alive. And when you distribute your votes and choose which of the top 30 that you want to vote for, that you don't need to just go and vote for the guys at the top. Have a look at everybody else that's involved in the community. And there's a tail of at least 50 really, really good guys that are not in the top 21, that are actually fulfilling very important functions in the EOS community. And give them your consideration.
Denny, how about you? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, the EOS, as Luke said, is not any cryptocurrency we have seen. It's a new network. It's a new internet. If you say the name in the US, it's about cost $50,000 for the .com for now. Sorry, 50,000 US is about $5 million for just a .com. So you can consider as the internet. When the Google or Apple or Microsoft, Alibaba want to came to the decentralized or want to get into the blockchain, the run price will, it's going up because a lot of things very expensive in the internet. So for now we have to to upgrade the smart contract as our block users to trying to do something good and make it real applied to the real things, just like Apple did now and Google did now, to change the world, to change the way we live, change the way we communicate. In that time, the RAM price will no longer a problem. But in short term, of course, we need to solve this problem. But in long term, I don't think it's a big problem. That's all.
Dafen, how about you? Yeah.
Yeah. So I talked to a lot of dApp developers, and a lot of people are very worried about the brand price right now, and I have explained to them and figure out plans for them. So I think if for the viewers, you are creating a dApp, and it's an awesome dApp, and if because of the brand price you're thinking about somewhere else and not EOS, I want you to reconsider and reach out to the block producers. We'll figure out a solution for you, and it is something that we really want to see. Great dApps being created on EOS and maybe used by users that are not aware that underneath it's running EOS, it's running blockchain. That is like the world that we envision. And if you have such dApp and you wanted to create on EOS, come to and you don't know how, and RAM is an issue for you, come talk to the VPs. We'll figure out a solution for you.
Yeah, Luke. So anything to add?
I just wanted to thank you for having this forum where the block producers can come and talk to the community directly. One of the biggest challenges for us is just getting a direct connection to the actual token holders. Those are the people we serve. There's a lot of concern about the block producers talking to each other to try and figure things out. And this early on, that's obviously has to happen, especially with security issues. But ultimately, we want to talk to the token holders. Those are the people that we want to listen to most, and we all have our different ways to be contacted through our website, through our telegrams, through our Discord channels. And so I just want to reiterate a thank you for having this opportunity for us to share And then also just to reach out to the token holders that this is your avenue to understand more about EOS, to be served well. We are incentivized to make sure you have a great EOS experience. So please reach out to your block producers that you're voting for, and they are incentivized to serve you and help you.
So thanks, Luke. Like what Luke mentioned, thanks everyone for your participation. Like if you have any more questions for each of these each of the BPs, do feel free to reach out to them at their respective social media channels after the show. Now, thanks.
Wait,
Luke.
one more thing.
Yes,
Welcome to Australia. Welcome to Australia. You guys have got your launch party in Melbourne. I'm not going to be there. I'll be at the next one. But yeah, it's great to have another exchange. Now we just need to list an EOS AUD trading pair.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you for joining us, and I guess we'll wrap up today.
Yes. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Ross.
Bye.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank Denny, Luke. Nice seeing you all again. Take care.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
So, Corey, would you like to share again with our viewers about the contest that we have up currently?
I just like to remind you guys, we have an airdrop for our viewers from now till the 9th of July. You can share your insights, summarize, and review this episode. Until the 9th of July, Monday, share your insights, summarize, and review this episode, and the top 5 articles from Medium and Steemit with the most number of likes will win 100 USDT worth of tokens. So that again, the 9th of July, Monday, you can share your insights and summarize and post them on Medium and Steemit, and the top 5 articles with the most number of likes will win 100 USDT worth of tokens, and you can check out the description below for more info.
So that's all from us today at Huobi Talk. Thank you so much for joining us on Huobi Talk. If you want to find out more or have any questions for us, you can join us on the Huobi Pro official Telegram. Search Huobi Pro official, or Twitter at Huobi_Pro, and on Instagram at Huobi Pro. Now check out the links at the description below right now. Lastly, remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel for the latest updates by clicking on the subscribe button right below right now.
So once again, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us at Huobi Talk episode 36. We hope to see you again.
Thanks. Bye. Till next Thursday.